I totally forgot about Fallacy Friday, so we're having Fallacy Saturday. Now, speaking of fallacies, I want to talk about today's sponsor. Guys, do you have low T? No, I don't have any sponsors, just kidding. Today we're doing the appeal to nature, which basically says that an argument or a decision is better because it follows nature's laws or nature's rules. There is some wisdom in saying things like, sunlight is the best medicine, kids spend too much time inside, adults do too, glued to screens and not getting out and exercising and just being out where the germs are to boost our immune system. But if Timmy has cancer, sunshine is not the best medicine. I talked about this in my hurricane climate change video, but the deal with fossil fuels actually improve the standard of living dramatically kind of betrays a lot of the talking points that people have, pushing against fossil fuels. They're unnatural and dirty and they harm us. But the data says that even if burning fossil fuels makes hurricanes and freak weather events more common, the fact that fossil fuels have been able to be used to build so much infrastructure has meant that you're tens, hundreds of times less likely to die of a natural disaster today. Many attempts to try to go natural are what you could call well-intentioned bad ideas. They either backfire for reasons that you couldn't predict, or they just don't work out. For example, there were these studies done with reusable and biodegradable shopping bags made from plant products and things like that, and they turned out to be more harmful to the environment than single-use plastic bags. Now, if the goal is to just have fewer plastics in the environment, well, then they were better, but there are going to be trade-offs with that. And for these reusable organic bags, when you combine the amount of fertilizer it took to make them, the greenhouse emissions from farming, which is in a way extremely inefficient, all the pesticides that had to be used, the amount of water that was used, overall, yes, these bags take the place of plastic bags like in the ground, but the actual environmental impact is far more harmful. Paper bags had a very tiny advantage over plastic bags, but there are also other studies that say that the paper bags are actually worse. And it only works. Here's the other thing that people don't understand. You only get the trade-off for the paper bag in this example if you use it 50 times. Funny enough, cotton bags were the worst. You'd have to reuse the cotton bag 7,000 times for it to be beneficial. That number I said earlier, 50 for the paper bags, that also applies to the biodegradable bags. 50 times is a lot for one bag. I don't know about you guys, but I have never taken a pen. I've never used all the ink in a pen. You can see I always destroy them in some way before I even use 10% of them. And for reusable shopping bags, I'm also terrible. Some other examples of appeals to nature, for example, the alpha wolf and the alpha males. I write about this in my second book, which will be coming out who knows when. But the whole thing about the alpha wolves, that was a flawed study. The wolves were observed in captivity, and in captivity, they started competing against one another because they were stressed out, and to the wolves' understanding, they were in a less healthy environment, and so certain members dominated over others because of basically the thought or the scare of insufficient resources. It turns out that when you observe these wolves in nature, they act differently. Wolves are more cooperative in nature. What's funny about this is the appeal to nature here both does and does not work. To say that an alpha wolf is aggressive and takes what it wants and therefore that's good, that's an appeal to nature, and there's the idea that we should be like that. However, at the same time, if you observe the wolves in nature, they're actually far more cooperative. So we go from type A personality to type B personality, but the debunk of the alpha wolf narrative is actually debunked by looking at it in more of a natural setting. Boys will be boys. That's perhaps an appeal to nature. That's just how they are, right? Now, I do think the pendulum is swinging a bit too far in the opposite direction with this. Kids, and that's boys and girls, having on average a particular kind of nature is just the way they are, and there isn't necessarily anything wrong with that, but don't use it to make excuses for bad behavior. Understanding something and justifying something are two different things. Mixed within this is the implication that if we say blank comes from nature, then we should do it, or that it is good. That's kind of an is-ought fallacy as well. I'm just going to rapid fire give you examples of appeals to nature that you hear sometimes. One is slavery. I've heard Dennis Prager and many other people say over and over again, because they won't condemn slavery in the Bible or, slavery in the West that happened during colonial times and post-colonial times early in American history, because nothing has been more natural to human nature than slavery. Everybody has practiced it. Nothing comes more natural than not wearing shoes. For the vast majority of human history, we did not wear shoes. For most of human history, we didn't have TV and phones. So, hey, get your eyes off of the TV and the phone once in a while. Now, that actually does sound like a good idea. But imagine if somebody said, whoa, for the vast majority of human history, we didn't have books. So stop reading books. Go outside, stab your neighbor to death, take what he has, and then dig some roots out of the ground and grind your teeth down flat, chewing on those roots forever because we don't know how to cook yet. That's human nature. Species go extinct all the time. So to hell with trying to mitigate species going extinct in the present, they're just gonna die anyways. The problem with that is we're pretty confident that the extinctions we're seeing now are a result of us doing very unnatural things. The so-and-so culture has been using herbal remedies for centuries. There almost certainly are health benefits in some of these herbal remedies that have been practiced for thousands of years because they're not stupid. They probably noticed that if you do certain things, it's beneficial, or at least not harmful. But in the modern age, we have developed specific technologies that can combat things that mushrooms can't. Then, of course, there's the whole essential oil thing, which I don't hear anything about essential oils anymore, but maybe I'm just not listening and maybe I'm not in those spheres. Funny enough, if you don't know this, genetically modified skeptic, basically his entire arc from fundamentalist Christian into skeptic was driven by the essential oils, pyramid scheme. If you don't know that story, you gotta look it up. It's pretty entertaining. Now, here's something interesting. If you don't know what homeopathy is, it's, at least from my understanding, it's the idea that water can acquire the characteristics of some sort of active ingredient, some sort of drug. So if we place an aspirin in water and then we dump that water or mix that water with other, in a giant vat or something, then the water will retain healing property, in this case, pain killing or anti-inflammatory properties. Totally 100% bogus. But you know what's really funny? A lot of people that work with doctors that practice homeopathy actually do see pretty decent outcomes for their long-term health. But the reason for that isn't that the homeopathy works, it's the nature of the doctor visit. The average doctor visit in this country is something like 15 or 17 minutes long the last time I looked. What a doctor needs to do is see as many patients as possible, to bill insurance as many times as possible, to make as much money as possible. But if you go to a homeopathy clinic, it's only you and a few other people that are there. Doctors in these clinics spend a lot more time with their patients, and they get much more rich and detailed personal information from them, and they give them lifestyle recommendations that end up being beneficial for them. And it doesn't have anything to do with the water that they're prescribing them. Artificial sweeteners, those are bad, like aspartame. I actually have a funny story about this. I was in a This is a long time ago. It was like my second, third year of teaching or something like that. And I was in a room with all the science teachers. We had a PD day, and we were talking. I don't know why we were talking about like sodas or like drinks or whatever. I think we were talking about like somebody was doing a unit on like counting calories in their biology class or anatomy class or something like that. And I brought up that I use those little Mio things every now and then, and they're really good and 0 calories. And like 5 people turned and looked at me, and one of them said, "That has aspartame in it." And I didn't say anything, but what I wanted to say was, yes, scientifically proven to do nothing at all. Now, there are some mouse studies where they were given huge amounts of aspartame, and they saw a statistically significant increase in cancer in them. But a mouse weighs a few grams, and you can give a mouse an amount of aspartame that would be like a human being consuming, like they come in the concentrated bottles. It would be like a human being downing countless quantities of those every day. Cancer statistics are also very weird. Bacon is classified as a like level 1 or schedule 1 carcinogen, which is in the same group as cigarettes. All that means is that there is a statistically noticeable effect of increased bacon consumption and cancer in the same way that there is with cigarettes. It doesn't mean that it's equally dangerous or equally likely. They just see a statistical correlation. While we're on this track, there are tons of fad diets like the paleo diet, for example. All I'm going to say about like diet things is the best diet is what works for you. You should treat a diet like a hobby. If you don't like it, you're not going to do it. Like, how many of us get gym memberships and we say, we're going to do this, but we're not gym people. We forced ourselves to get those memberships because we want to be a different kind of person, but that's not what we are, and it doesn't work out. This is similar to the extinction thing, but you hear animals eat other animals, so factory farming isn't bad or veganism is invalid. This may be a little bit closer to an equivocation fallacy, but I think the sentiment is there. I don't know about you guys, but I couldn't debate a vegan. I would just simply say, I want to do it. The talking point of people have been doing blank forever, that can be an appeal to nature, but there's often a strong cultural element, and that would make it more of like an appeal to tradition or a genetic fallacy. Now, with all this being said, nature is good. I would rather live in a world with internet and air conditioning and all these other kinds of things, but it's not like nature is inherently bad. Weeds suck, but you know what sucks worse than weeds? Glyphosate, because it gives you cancer. The medical field, as we all know, has made horrible mistakes by trying to artificially make the pain go away. It was a term I learned a few years ago. We've all heard of helicopter parents, right? These are parents that they're busybodies and they're always kind of in their kids' business. Well, for several years, what I've noticed are bulldozer parents. Bulldozer parents make every single negative thing disappear, or they expend all their energy trying to do that and failing. Hilarious story. I was talking to a teacher who was telling me that actually a coworker of theirs has this parent that keeps calling and harassing the teacher because their student got a B+. Well, they're just not a B+ student. You need to take that grade out of the grade book. Not kidding you. If you know any teachers, tell them about bulldozer parents. If they've never heard about it before, it'll probably become their favorite term. And just ask them the stories about bulldozer parents. I promise you they have tons. But anyways, bulldozer parents, they're not just keeping their kids from getting hurt. They're actually delaying their development. Kids need to interact with their environment in the good and bad ways to learn from those experiences. I think I went over this a little bit earlier, but things like immune disorders and allergy disorders, we're seeing skyrocketing rates of that stuff because we're too busy sanitizing our environment and not letting kids go outside and play. Are you statistically safer in your house versus outside? Maybe. I mean, you're less likely to get hit by lightning if you're inside of your own home. But again, there are trade-offs, like the shopping bags thing. I think we're already experiencing a pretty rude awakening from those trade-offs coming to fruition. By all means, go to your local butcher or farmer's market instead of buying Tyson frozen chicken. Nature can be good. There's probably a pretty strong correlation between how convenient something is versus how much it's actually bad for you. Speaking of food, which I've done a lot today, processed foods. Now, they are objectively bad for us, mostly because of the excess carbohydrates and the very low starch. But that doesn't mean that we all need to follow a Liver King diet. Human beings, we aren't inherently evil, okay? We do have a human nature, and that can cause us to be animalistic in many ways, but we are also hardwired to be social and cooperative. There isn't a single human nature that we should condemn. All you're doing is saying that somebody or people in general are inherently bad. And this is the huge problem I have with the concept of toxic masculinity. There are people that are toxically masculine, but we can't paint broad strokes against entire groups of people. That will never work. You might know somebody who drives a Tesla, eats at Panera, shops at Whole Foods, won't neuter their dog, or, whatever. They're just different. They're not necessarily wrong. So in summary, the appeal to nature is fallacious, but be careful. Nature isn't inherently bad.